Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. In today's video, going to go through some updated final thoughts ahead of round 18. The final major buy round, we'll look at the top 10 trade ins and outs and a few more other trade ins as well. And also have a look at the captaincy and vice captaincy percentages. I won't go through my own team and trade specifically. I have done a separate video for this that is going to be available on my Patreon. So if you are keen to see that, and probably something I'll more likely do just specifically for Patreon for the rest of the season, you can go check that out. There'll be a link in the description below. I kind of go through what I think is my kind of final ideal run home squad. What trades do I need to get there? What trades that kind of leaves me with in the bank? And that kind of helped inform my own trade thoughts for this week. But for the final thoughts, we'll try to get onto some of the more popular trade ins and outs. Number one was Nawaqanitawase. We went through his stats a lot on Tuesday in terms of wing versus center. Look, I still really like the trade in of Marky Mark. In that video specifically, I went through what I think is my ideal kind of center wing setup. I do feel like the top 6 centers that I could probably want to get for the run home would be Herbie, Lomax, Karaz, Garrick, Marky Mark, and Val Holmes. Those 6 kind of stood out to me. I'm sure there's someone else out there that I'm missing and whatnot, but if you look just purely at averages, I'm going to assume that they're pretty much up there in terms of averages. And what I like about Nawaqanitawase is obviously he's got that really big average playing on the wing, but he's also someone that you don't have to play every single week. You can play him on matchups, so that helps with your squad depth in terms of, and also just your sit v start decisions. Like for example, if you look at say round 21, yes, it's a home game, but it's against Melbourne. You might think, you know what, not going to play him that round, or round 24, for example, or maybe even round 26. It's an away game to Melbourne, although Melbourne could rest their players, so who knows. But you're someone that you don't always have to play every single week. But this week against Tigers looks really, really appetizing. Even if he scores 65, that's his average at centre. That's still a very, very solid score for this week. Not a bad price at 633k. Ignore the fact that he was almost 200k cheaper to start the year. But I think given the quality of the matchup this week and also next week against the Dragons in what's going to be a tough week, can't really knock the trade in of Marky Mark. And people going Isaako to him, I have a feeling that's one of the top trades. Yeah, Isaako to Nawaqanitawase is the 7th most popular trade overall. I can get on board with that. So in terms of Isaako himself, he's got a higher break even of 106. Now, he comes back against the Sharks, which is okay matchup, nothing amazing. Round 20 against the Cowboys looks really, really good. So definitely, we'll be concerned to not owe him in that particular week. But then he goes into a buy in round 21. Then it's the Warriors, Roosters, Broncos. So the run gets a little bit tougher. The very last 2, well, Manly and Titans looks good. Then Canberra is also the very last game of the round. So again, up and down draw. I think he's someone who, given the way that the Dolphins are attacking, they definitely favour the left-hand side. And even if Nikorima's not there, I just still feel like that's going to be their dominant edge. And obviously his goal kicking is amazing. He's probably one of the best goal kickers you'll ever see, to be honest. Is beautiful to watch in goal kicking. And the 60 is his floor. That's great. And he's obviously got a big ceiling on him, but he is worth 700k. It feels like a good time to, you can make 70k going him to Marky Mark. And I think, I think I'd prefer to have Nawaqanitawase, even though Nawaqanitawase will have lower games in him, but we've seen that he's also got a big ceiling on him as well. And I think to get a good number in for this week, Isaako to Marky Mark does make sense to me. Kane Bradley's also one thing I should say, I'm looking at trade-ins for the top 5%. So I'm looking at a bit more trade trends in the higher ranked coaches just to see what those guys are kind of thinking, because you can see the difference. Jed Stewart, I think, is the 2nd most traded in player overall. Top 5% though, he's like down in 7th. So there's obviously a big disparity there. Kane Bradley is the 2nd most traded in player amongst these higher ranked coaches. Probably the most popular enough this week. I do think that, well, he's not enough. He's playing this round. He's probably playing round 19 as well. Now, I don't think he should become someone who's shouldn't become an auto emergency nightmare. So I think he's going to drop out eventually and become a good second row forward center wing nuff dual. So if you're owning someone like maybe a Lockie Hubner and you've got good numbers already this week, I don't mind even just going Hubner down to him, especially in this week where you've got 3 trades. You can kind of set yourself up to get that money in the bank to bring in all the guns that maybe you've traded out or want to get in post-origin. Maybe you want to get back in a Payne Haas or a Nathan Cleary, or get in like a Hudson Young, or get in like a Munster or a Campbell, whatever it may be, or a Val. There's plenty of high-priced guys you want to get post-origin. You're going to need money to do that. It's not a bad week to go nothing, especially when you've got the dual status, and also he plays this week and could honestly score a try or 2 against the Cowboys. Now, Preston and Kikau, I'm going to talk about them together, the third and sixth most traded in players in the top 5%. We spent so much time discussing this on Tuesday. I'm not going to rehash all of that. There is, Kikau's got half the trade-ins of Preston this week. I think this week Preston's got a better matchup running at Ezra Mam for the Broncos. Rest of the year, though, I still have a feeling that Kikau's going to be the one that I'd prefer. Preston is pretty expensive at $690. Kikau's not cheap either at $656. But I just like what I'm seeing from Kikau. Good work rate, and he's got that big attacking upside in him as well. And yeah, if we look at the Bulldogs draw, it's very, very good for the next kind of 5 to 6 weeks. So Broncos this week is okay. They're without their origin players. Then you've got Cowboys, Dragons, Manly, West Tigers. So that's a very, very nice stretch of games there. Even the Warriors have conceded a fair amount on their right-hand side, and that's a home game in Sydney for the Doggies. Then it's the Roosters, who, Roosters, Melbourne, Penrith, Sharks will be more difficult. But this is the beauty of either Kikau or Preston. You don't have to play them every single week if you don't want to. So I'm very keen on Kikau. I still think Kikau is who I'd be leaning towards over Preston, in my opinion. Slightly lower work rate, but I think his upside is probably there. And I like the fact that he's always got Matt Burton on his edge. With Preston, we're seeing that rotation between Sexton and Galvin. I just prefer the consistency and the familiarity of knowing what you're going to get on that left-hand side for the Dogs. Jerome Hughes is the fourth most traded in player. One of the most popular trades this week is the Hynes to Hughes trade. Now, on Tuesday, I was much more for this just because it was a case of, get that number in this week who's going to be pretty scary to not have this week and could really hurt you if you don't have. Selling Hynes, I'm a little bit less strongly opinionated about it though, because the run home draw is pretty good apart from the last few weeks. So if you look at the future rounds, Dolphins and Roosters is a bit tough, but at least they're at home games. Then you've got the Rabbitohs, Cowboys, Dragons, and Titans a bye. Then it's the Knights, and then round 27 is tough against the Doggies. There is a good stretch of games there for Hynes. And I think compared to Hughes, I'd almost argue his draw is a little bit better. So Hughes has got Cowboys this week is obviously the best week. Then it's the Knights, Manly, Roosters, Parramatta, Broncos, Penrith, Bulldogs, Roosters, Broncos again. I do think that in this overall run home stretch, I'd say Hynes has a better draw than Hughes. Hughes definitely has the form though. That's one thing that can't be denied. But this is the thing. I've owned Jerome Hughes for a fair amount of time now. I brought him in all the way back in round 6 when he got 16 points and got injured. Now, of course, he was battling that kind of shoulder issue at that point. It was crook apparently against the Titans. Maybe you're seeing the real Jerome Hughes here, which is the big tons, but he does have the low floor in him as well. I think it's a case of Hynes is more solid. He's going to get you 60 to 80 probably every week. Hughes is going to get you those 40s, but he's going to get you these big tons. Which of the two do you have a preference for? If I was in the boat of having Hynes this week and not having Hughes, I would probably talk myself into doing Hynes to Hughes, and you can just run home with Hughes, and that's no problem. I just would be very scared of not having him this week, even next week in round 19 against the Knights. It is an away trip, but I think Hughes for the next 3 or 4 will probably outscore Nico. So I think for me, yes, I would probably do that particular trade. Scott Drinkwater as a trade-in. I'm actually not sure if I'd be trading in Drinkwater this week. I know Melbourne have lost a lot of origin players this round, but it's still Melbourne, albeit it's a home game. I just think that for Drinkwater, we've seen the massive roller coaster. He is obviously performing much better with Jake Clifford in the side, but I do feel like because of the position he's in, if you can just avoid him this week, look, he might go score 70 to 80, which is okay, but you can probably stomach that. And then he's got the Bulldogs in round 19, and by not going Drinkwater, you can instead cherry pick a pod fullback that no one else really owns. Latrell, Dylan Edwards, Reece Walsh. And you can go against the grain and go against the crowd because the top 5%, I'm willing to bet the 80+% will be Teddy, Pappy, and Drinkwater. That's the most popular 3 fullback combination. If you can get through this week in a week where I don't think a lot of people are going to be either captaining or vice-captaining him as well. So even if he does go big, it's not going to be one of those like, oh my God, he's absolutely killed me here because half the game has doubled his points. It feels like I think you can get away with not bringing him in this week. And instead you can maybe go in a different direction come round 19, round 20. His own run home draw, apart from the next 3, is also pretty good. It's a bit of a mixed bag. So if you own him, I think it's again, position of don't own. If you own, don't sell. If you don't own, don't buy. What is it? Don't buy, don't sell kind of thing. Jed Stewart as number 7. I don't love him as a pure. I get it for a pure downgrade at 198k. But I do think if you're going straight for a downgrade, like in terms of his output, he hasn't been amazing. He's only played 2 games, to be fair. But the Raiders do have buys coming up in round 19, which is going to be a tricky round. And I think it's round 24, 25. They've got another one. So there's going to be a couple of weeks that you're going to miss out on him. And I think if you're going for a pure downgrade, hopefully you've got decent numbers for this week, I'd rather just get someone who's got dual. That's why I think I prefer Kane Bradley as enough downgrade this week. You've got Jed Stewart. You've even got like a Kalani going, who's actually the 11th most traded player in the higher ranks. Obviously, different position. He's second row forward and hooker. But again, I prefer the fact that he's just dual status. So not overly keen really on Jed Stewart. I understand it for the pure downgrade, but wouldn't be where I'd probably be going if that's the way I was going in terms of trying to downgrade. Kaua and James Tedesco, absolutely. These are 2 of the scariest guys to have to not have this week. I would be 100% trading in Kikau above a Jacob Preston, above a Viliami Kikau. And Teddy is must own this week. Like must own. Obviously, could all crash and burn, but he's 96.8% owned in the top 5%. And I'm willing to bet, I haven't looked at the captaincy percentages. Well, there you go. 75% captain. He is 75% captain by the top 5%. If you don't own Teddy this week and he goes big, that will hurt. Doesn't matter if you've got 20 players, not that you can pick 20 players. You have 18 players of guns. If he goes big and your captain gets 50-60, no, it's not happening for you this week. Hosking, I don't love that as a trade in this week. I know he scored well last round, but he's got the buy in round 19, and it wasn't that long ago that many people were looking to jump off of Hosking, because he did have a few games where his kind of scores were okay, but nothing amazing. Prior to the 106, it was 47, 61, 54, 43. There was a good run of not many good scores from Hosking. So I'm not sure if I'd be looking at him as a trade-in. I do feel like it's one of those cases where, yes, he plays as a number this week, but he misses 19 anyway. If you're bringing in Hosking, I would pause, wait a week, spend 30k more, get Angus Crichton in round 19. That would be my play if I was in that position of a 545k second rower. Karapani, so he's number 12. So obviously most coaches went and bought him last week. Now on Tuesday, I said he's still a fine trade-in. Thinking about it a little bit more though, it depends really on the situation. If you're going Isaako to him to free up 200 something K, I understand it because you're still freeing up a lot of money. He is, the numbers aren't lying. He is currently, I think, the highest averaging center wing, and that's not due to the fact that he's just gotten lucky. That left wing spot for the Broncos has always been good this year. So I can see him being like just a very, very good hold for 6th or 7th center's position. But I don't think he's as must of a trade and nowhere near as much of a must as last week. Last week was different where he was 290. So I think it's still okay, but I'm not necessarily going out there saying, yeah, you have to still get him this week because I think the reason I'd want to get him this week is if he's your stepping stone to another gun center. I don't think I'd be getting him purely for points because yes, he's scoring a lot of tries, but that's not going to continue. So I think I would be getting Karapani if you thought that he'd make another 150, 200k. Round 20, he has a buy, and then maybe you can flip him to another gun center wing at that point in time. We'll keep going down the rest of the list up until about number 15, 16. Lomax, people are looking at him as an early trader for this week. Look, I get it. Lomax is in my top 4 run home centers, but I do find it risky to bring in an Origin player just when you just never know what's going to happen in an Origin game, especially someone like him. He's always very involved, right? Like he's taking so many runs out of his own end. He's pretty durable, but you just never know what can happen in Origin. So ideally you just wait. Ezra Mam, there's a bunch of 5/8s here in a row. I actually forgot to speak about Matt Burton completely on the Tuesday pod. Out of Ezra Mam, Matt Burton and Kaua weeks, I think I'd actually go Matt Burton, to be honest. Matt Burton should be goal kicking this week with no Stephen Crichton. If Crichton gets a rest in round 19, Burton will be goal kicking again. And we went through the draw earlier for the Bulldogs. The next kind of 5-6 rounds looks really, really good. Ezra Mam is a bit hot and cold. Kaua weeks definitely is the definition of hot and cold. Sure, he's the most expensive, but if you're selling a Metcalf and you're desperate for a 5/8 this round, I think pick the guy who is goal kicking this week, and I think has also got the best draw for the next kind of 5 to 6 weeks as well. He's got no more buys for the rest of the year. So if you bring him in and you just sit in there, you don't even need to play him every single week. Kaua weeks and Ezra Mam, they still have a couple of buys coming up in future rounds, and at least with Burton, I probably trust his team the most as well. Some early trade-ins as well for Val. Garrick, of course, I think if you don't own him, it's a very, very good matchup against the Rabbitohs, so it definitely would be encouraging to bring him in as well. That's all I wanted to talk about in terms of the top trade-ins. In terms of the outs, a lot of them make sense. Metcalf, Isaako, Tino, I won't speak about him a whole bunch, but yes, I'm very tempted still to sell him. I just think that this injury is going to hamper him for the remainder of the season. It's generally not an injury that tends to go away, I think, very quickly. I'll fact check that with NRL Physio, but yeah, I'm not sure how good Tino is going to go. The minutes were good last week, but the work output was definitely down in that time. Jenkins, look, he's at a good price, and if you can sell him for a Nawaqanitawase, I'd probably do that move. But again, he's someone that if you feel like you want to hold him, absolutely no issues holding, because the run home for Penrith in at least the next 5 is really good. Parramatta, Rabbitohs, Tigers, all of those games at CommBank. Then it's the Titans and then the Knights. Like that run until round 23 is really, really good. Now his scoring will be up and down. You know, he will get these 31s, 55s, but he will get these big tons, 117, 151. It's just, do you think you'll be happy enough to keep him and play him? And think that he can match against your likes of a Nawaqanitawase, a Val, a Lomax, etc. I'd lean towards saying no, he can't, therefore probably okay to sell, but that draw is really, really enticing. So he could actually remain a bit of a decent point of difference because as you can see, he's only 5% owned by the top 5%. So it actually could be a very, very handy point of difference player that no one's really going to buy him as well because people tend to not like to buy back the cheapies that they once sold and cashed in on. Nico Hynes, we've spoken a bit about him. AFB, honestly, I don't mind selling him as well. He's been a bit underwhelming. And Olakwatu, Couchman, Hubner, they all make sense to me as sells. Now, let's take a quick look at vice captaincy and captaincy. So, Pappy is still the most popular VC at 38%. Hughes is next at 14%. And then Garrick at 10%. Garrick 10%, VC Garrick to me doesn't make sense because he plays after Tedesco. You need to have something on Teddy this week, basically. What I like is this number here of Teddy, 5% VC. So, look, God forbid anything happens to Teddy during the game. But if something were to happen, you can see the masses are all captaining him. If you are one of the 5% who just VCs Teddy and you get a free loop this week, if you just say VC Teddy, he goes and scores, let's say Pappy scores 80. No one's probably going to loop that. Let's say Teddy goes and scores 90. It's fair enough. It's an okay score. And as a VC, you might just take it. And you can just take that score along with the rest of the crowd. But what if he gets hurt, God forbid, scores 15, 20 points? 75% of people are going to score 40 points from that, and they can't change it unless they've taken a big VC score from one of the Storm boys. But if you're in that position where you've gone, okay, well, Teddy's gone low as my VC, I'm just going to chance it on like a Ruben Garrick or a Koloamatangi. That's really the biggest pod play you can do this week. But it's still kind of hedging your bets appropriately because you're still putting the VC on Teddy. And so long as you've got a free loot in this particular round where it's only your best 13, it's completely fine to do that strategy. So that 5% looks really, really tempting. I definitely wouldn't be captaining Koloamatangi above Garrick. If I own Garrick and Koloamatangi and you had to rely on that very last game, it would be Garrick for me as captain. Of Hughes and Pappy, I know Hughes has got the individual matchup because the Cowboys do leak points to halfbacks. I just think that Pappy's had a bit of a quiet few weeks without Harry Grant, without Munster. I just think he's going to need to get his hands more on the ball. And I can see him popping off hopefully for a good kind of, hopefully 110, 115. I think I need to see about 110 to really be comfortable looping this round. So I think still I'll lean on VC Pappy just because that matchup against the Cowboys is very good. And I think there could still be some big points in that game. That's probably why I'm not going to do the VC Teddy strategy, just because I still think there's big potential for some big scores, either from Pappy or Hughes in this particular game. Drinkwater is a bit of a also alternative option, only 6% VC'd or 7% captained. I'm banking on the Storm in this one. Hence why I'm just defaulting to VC Pappy, Captain Tedesco. It's just the most common, boring way of doing it this round. We've spoken about the VC Teddy strategy, but I've told you why I'm probably not going to be doing that. I'll probably stick with the fullbacks, VC Pappy and Captain Tedesco. So hopefully you all enjoyed that video. I'm just going to quickly check if I haven't missed anyone important to talk about this week. I think we've spoken about all the trade ins and outs. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed that video. As I said, done a specific video on my trades that will be up on Patreon if you want to check that one out. If not, if I don't speak to you all again before the round starts, good luck for round 18 and see you all in the next one.